Welcome to Talk Design Podcast, the space where creativity meets conversation. I'm Adrian Ramsey, your host, and as someone deeply entrenched in the world of design, I'm thrilled to introduce you to the minds that inspire me in the hope that they will spark something special within you too. From a design past crafting women's swimwear to pushing the boundaries of performance sportswear, from mountaineering to international yachting, to implementing systematic innovation solutions that transcend boundaries in aerospace industry. My heart remains rooted in architecture, and exploring the emotional tapestry woven by built spaces is my fascination. My journey in design has been what can only be described as a life of design. I want to thank you for lending me your ears. I'm eager to embark on this next episode together. And for those of you who prefer to watch and listen, you can catch this episode at YouTube. That's youtube.com/@TalkDesignPodcast. My guest on Talk Design today is Brian Laubenthal from ALINE Architecture in Scottsdale, Arizona. Now, Brian and I have just been having a little chat about what they do. And, I've seen some of their work, haven't met them personally other than on Zoom yet, but they're really all about crafting meaningful environments that inspire people and community. And this is something that really captures me. I think that we often get sort of micro down to clients that are just about this little one thing, and we forget about the community that we're creating, whether that be a residential home or whether we be in a restaurant space or in a park or whatever it is. How do we place make? And so I'm fascinated to go through this with Brian this morning. So Brian, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No worries at all, man. I want to start off with, somewhere back in the day, there was something that sparked architecture into your mind. You might have been, a 5-year-old kid or something like that. I often talk to people and they don't even remember when they discovered that there was a thing called architecture. You don't sort of pop out of the womb and go, oh yeah, I'm going to be an architect. So tell us that little journey and what the inspirations were and you deciding to do this, because I think that would be, everyone's is a little unique and it's a bit fascinating.
Yeah, so mine started when I was pretty young. My parents took us on a little road trip out west. I grew up in Michigan.
Uh-huh.
And on that road trip, we stopped at Taliesin East, and it was Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture. And up until that point, I really didn't know much about Frank Lloyd Wright. And I remember getting a book there that was about falling water, and it really captured my interest. And after that, I just really started looking more into architecture. And then the other inspiration from my childhood was the Swiss Family Robinson treehouse from the movie, and grew up always wanting to live in that treehouse and how it kind of blended and connected with nature, kind of like falling water. And then in the 7th grade, my English teacher asked our class to write a paper about what we want to be when we grow up and how is it going to help the world. And I remember at that point really taking that paper seriously and thinking about really what do I want to be. And it's interesting in 7th grade because I have a 13-year-old son now that's in 7th grade, and thinking, for him to sit down and think seriously about something like that, it's interesting. But I sat down, and some of the things that really always drove me was helping the environment and helping people.
Yeah, right.
And with that interest in architecture, I wanted to use architecture to help both of those things and kind of be the medium that I use. And so I wrote a paper about wanting to be an architect, wanting to help the environment, reduce pollution, help people, and just kind of make a better community. And I'm sure it wasn't written quite like that back in 7th grade, but that was kind of the basis behind it. And so as I got older, I at seventh grade, that was my focus from there. I want to be an architect. So I wanted to go to the University of Michigan for my undergrad. I took all the classes I needed to do that. And from that process, I wanted to go to Arizona State University because they had the best school for environmental design. And so I really made that my passion, my drive for what I wanted to be. And then, you know, that kind of led me into architecture and getting out to Arizona.
That's fascinating. I've also got a 13-year-old, and it makes me want to go and challenge her because she is just going into grade 8 this year, and challenge her on write a paper about what you want to be when you grow up, or where you're going from here. And they do a bit of that at her school, but I'm going to go and put the screws on her a little bit to find out, because like that road trip, it sparked the spark. You saw something, because thousands of people have been on a road trip like that. Probably there'd be all those kids that went, really, we have to go in here. Nowadays you'd have trouble getting them out of the car and off a device. I don't want to look at some dumb building kind of thing. And then but it does that. And I think also, like, you're not the first who's been, this discovery came on a road trip. And with that, it is, you're out of your normal environment, and you shift to another environment, and all of a sudden you see possibility, because the day-to-day of your normal environment isn't contextual anymore.
Right.
I love that. I think that's really cool that, and that you can remember what sparked it.
Right. And in my hometown, like, there wasn't a lot of great architecture. So kind of getting out of that norm, like you're saying, and seeing architecture outside of that and kind of opening my eyes, being like, this is
Yeah,
what's
wow.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, I love that. I love that. What a great way of, and so you went to Michigan, and then from Michigan, you already had that path mapped out pretty much, that you were going to head to Arizona. And then, so you landed in Arizona, you did your study, though, completed your study there. And then what? What happened from there? You had to go and get a job, or did you just put a shingle out?
So, well, I've always been driven in a kind of an entrepreneurial kind of mindset of, I don't really care for working for others. I want to drive my own future.
Yeah.
But while I was at ASU, I went to one of their studio nights where different companies came in and offered internships. And so while I was at ASU, I saw a company that I was interested in. They did higher level, they did interior design, but they also did the architecture, and they did a lot of restaurant design, commercial buildings, as well as some high-end residential. And I loved that the design that they produced was something that was inspiring, and that you walk into their spaces and kind of, it'd make your head turn and kind of look around and want to, see more. So that kind of led me in the direction of taking an internship with that company, where I worked at for 4.5 years. So I worked there through part of my graduate school, and then stayed there and worked full time after grad school.
Yeah, right.
And I I worked on several different restaurant projects as well as some other hospitality projects. But the project manager that I worked with there is now my business partner, and his name was also Brian Krob.
I noticed that it's the Bryans.
Yeah, and that's what we're known for. Like, we were known as the Bryans our first several years in business, before people really even knew our company name, it seemed like.
That's
But
cool.
met Brian there. He was a good friend to me and a mentor. Coming out of college, he already had a few years ahead of me. And one of our first projects, we walked into the job site and we introduced ourselves, and the client said, "Oh, is your company name Brian and
Brian.
Brian?"
Yeah.
And we were like, "No, no, no." Like, and it kind of became a running joke from there. Like, we're going to have a company called the Bryans, or not
Yeah.
called the Bryans. We always kind of became a running joke. And so I worked for that company for a while, got some great experience, and then went to another company that was much more focused on ground up, larger development work.
Mhm.
And my business partner, Brian, stayed at the firm that I was at with him for a while. And so we kept in communications, but I got a lot more experience in the kind of the ground up development world. And that really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And it inspired me to get my LEED certification. And then when the recession started, that company was struggling and was letting employees go. And the owner of the company also had cancer. So it was an unfortunate situation going through all of that, but he let everyone go except for me. And at the end, when he was ill, I was in the office kind of running everything, doing everything from the admin side to running the projects.
Yeah,
And
wow.
so at the end of 2009, my business partner, he left the company that we had worked at together and came over to help me finish up some projects as that company was kind of closing.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So,
that was kind of,
so you just kind of like by that, just by morphed it into
yeah,
ALINE. Did you go to ALINE straight away? Is that what you created, or how did that
yeah.
piece happen?
So we sat down and said, at that time it was easier to start a company that wasn't find a job because it was just the economy was,
Yeah.
not doing so well. So we just sat down and said, let's give this a shot. And I'm always kind of the go, go, go person. And he's kind of the more conservative, like, well, let's think through this some more and let's
One's, yeah,
figure it
one's
out.
got higher critical thinking than the other when it comes to like you're gonna move, but then high drive. So you're gonna move, but you're gonna keep moving. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, will
And
not be
so
denied.
we're a good balance that way that we kind of balance each other out. But we sat down, we went through a lot of names. ALINE was one of the first names that we came up with, and it kind of circled back to it. And so that company that I was at was closing. They couldn't pay me for my last few months that I was there. And so the owner's wife just said, if there's any office, tables or chairs or anything you guys want to take, go for it.
Yeah.
And so we took the server. I think we had a couple folding tables and a couple chairs. And one of the engineers that was a consultant for us asked what we were going to do. And I said, well, we're just going to work out of our house and figure it out. And he's like, well, I let half my staff go during the recession. Why don't you guys come use part of my office space?
Yeah.
And any projects you get, just give me the engineering side of it. And so we said, sure, that sounds great. And so we moved into this. We actually, the two of us shared like a cubicle area, set up our little station, and we had no clue how to run a business, but we started figuring it out.
I love that. Like, recessions, there's a silver lining in every situation, like even the fact that your your previous employer got ill, none of this would have happened unless that had happened in that way. And the serendipity of that is that you were the one that he could trust, could see for his clients, because he could have just closed everything and gone, do you know what, they can go and find somebody else. Instead, he trusted you to take it over and to make sure that his clients got what was required to finish it. And so that alone is just beautiful values. And then you go from that to his wife saying, like, if you need stuff, just take it, like, again, it's a beautiful gesture. And then you think of doing that, and then, your other friend, Brian, coming and helping you there to get you through that piece. And then from that, all of a sudden, everybody's like, they're reaching out for your success. The engineer's reaching out for your success, and he's looking for his own success from it as well. And doing that, and then you come back to your piece that we said at the beginning, it's about inspiring people in community. And clearly, that's part of just the makeup and the values that you have that are, within you, and it creates that momentum. I think it's brilliant. So ALINE kind of, it is an alignment, isn't it? And especially when as a 13-year-old kid, you're gone, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. You know, all those people who go, oh, you don't need to write your goals down. Probably pays to, eh? The outcome is proven in so many ways. I love it. I think it's really wonderful. So that took you where you did have quite a few restaurant spaces and stuff. And did you take over some of the original guy's kind of client base as well along the way?
There were a few clients that followed us from that company that closed. And then there were other people that we had worked with in the past. We never went out to go after them, but they started calling us and be like, hey, you guys took care of us. We know that we can trust you and you're going to provide us with a great service. So we want to support you back.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. That's community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's segue from that to, it's talking about now, because that's a bit in the past, talking about now and what you're working on and what you're seeing the future as being. Take me through some of the things that are exciting that are happening and the vision that you see in the next sort of 5 or 10 years, not necessarily just for the company, but for architecture. And we can throw global warming in if you want.
Well, a big part of our company is our values, and we place it on craft and community and collaboration. So our goals have always been to bring those values more into our projects or find projects that suit those values. And it's not necessarily that we want huge projects. We want the right projects that, that feed our passion, feed those values and make a difference. And so with the craft, it's just about bringing a higher level design and attention to detail. And we work with a lot of existing buildings. And so, Phoenix is kind of an interesting area. There are some buildings that have character or history, but then it's kind of few and far between.
Yeah, there's a lot of new. Yeah.
So it's a challenge of how do you take, an old building that doesn't have a lot of character, but strip it to its essence and repurpose it and give it a new life. And so those are really exciting projects for us. And we've done a lot of breweries and office spaces where we've done that and taken, an old industrial building and convert it and make it something that's new and wonderful that people want to be in.
Mm-hmm. So great for gentrification.
Right.
Yeah.
So those mean a lot to us. And those kind of, it kind of feeds the values of community and working with the environment and taking the environment into mind, that we don't want to just tear everything down and build something new. We want to repurpose and upcycle the buildings and, less waste going to the landfills, less new materials having to be generated. And then it's also looking out for the client and their budget and what is important to them.
I remember doing a podcast with a friend of mine now, Richard Dajetsky from London, and we were talking about sustainability. And of course, London, it's built. You've got to knock something down to build something new. And he was saying to me, he said, well, you've got to take the premise, that the most sustainable house or building is the one that's already there. And then we start working at that point. And I was paralleling it with him to the founder of Yvon Chouinard, and he says, we often we'll go to an area that is yet to be gentrified. We'll go and find a building in an area and we'll restore that building, ideally a historic building. We'll restore that building and upgrade it so that it becomes a Patagonia store, because people travel to go to Patagonia stores. They don't just, other shops will come around it, other things will. Patagonia is a big enough draw card that people will come to it, and it gives them that opportunity to create community and inspire people to come, and it gives other people that probably the confidence also to come and do that. And all the time they're using craft to do it because they want to maintain as much of what they can and then make good of that to create something new. So that whole piece just resonates with me so much that, yeah, me personally, I just think it's the most wonderful way. We look at projects a similar way with, should it be renovated or should it be removed? And removal is, kind of my last option. I would far rather, I'd far rather work through, can we get everything we need from a renovation for that reason? Well, it's not the only reason, but it's one of the main ones.
And I love a brand new building that we get to design and do it all. But I don't know, there's something more meaningful about those projects when you can find ways to just give it a new purpose.
Yeah, like you were saying with, say, things like breweries and microbreweries, these, have shifted, I suppose, the alcohol outlet kind of mentality a lot in the last, like, probably 20 or 30 years, to, especially with the microbrewery movement, where instead of it just being a big corporate and it's ticking boxes, it's guys like you and Brian ending up in the engineer's office and then going, where do we go from here? How do we take this from here? And you're crafting the thing, you're pulling it together as you go. And I love the fact that, we get this here as well in Australia. Suddenly there'll be, an old whatever it was turned into a microbrewery, da 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 da. And a lot of them get bought up by the big brewing companies. There's a sellout and they get bought up, but the whole essence of it and creating a space, because people will travel for beer, like they'll travel
Right.
for entertainment. So tell me about being in the restaurant space. I've got a very good friend here in Australia, Kelly van der Merwe, who's also on the podcast somewhere, and he is like an expert in the restaurant space, and he's like a scientist with the thing, like he'll talk to me about chairs being 1 millimeter taller or smaller, But tell me about the restaurant space, is because I think you get the difference from just creating a building. You get to create an environment that is, again, inspiring, relaxing, whatever it is that's needed, but also it can be brand driven. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that, and then how you craft that into community as well.
So the restaurants have been a special part of our business, and we've really just dived into them to understand it, from a functionality standpoint to the aesthetics to what that user experiences and how their touch points. And for us, we always start with our restaurants with looking at how we can create different unique experiences within them. We want someone to come with their family and have a different experience as someone who comes for a date or wants to come there and sit at the bar. And so we kind of create separations within the restaurant by using furniture or using materials and walls or whatever it might be. And we want everyone to be able to come back each time and feel like, oh, this is a different experience. Because when you go to a restaurant and it's just that one experience, it really doesn't inspire you to want to go back as much, unless
Yeah.
you're just going there just to pick up some food and something about the food. But when you want it to be about the space and the aesthetics and the brand of it, it really makes a difference in how you experience it each time. So that's kind of how we start the restaurants. And then we have a collaboration of different consultants that we use that are experts in restaurants as well. And we really focus on the lighting and all the different, elements to really make sure that the whole brand comes together. And so we come in from the initial concept design phase. We just completed a high-end Asian concept called Jinja in North Phoenix. And the owner had this concept of wanting this, it's a Korean inspired restaurant with a kind of a Chinese infusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so we pulled in some of the traditional kind of colors, but one of the things that inspired me was the Chinese Lantern Festival and these pictures of just tons of lanterns and the light that they create in the environment. And so we use that as a big drive of the concept of the restaurant and use these lanterns that kind of surround you at the entry. It covers the ceiling going into the restrooms. and they're using different other areas of the restaurant, and it just kind of creates these different immersive kind of experiences within the restaurant.
Love it.
So when we can kind of drive that full design and work with our consultants and everyone and have that concept approach and pull it together, it really creates something uh, very successful in the end.
I think it gives people a lot of emotional ties and tags to it. Like as you said before, like there's restaurants where you just go to pick up food, or you're eating because you're hungry. You just, that's what it is. But when you're trying to make a deeper connection with people, you want to journey them from where they are today to into something different, so it becomes an experience. And
Yep.
I think that the fact that restaurants have kind of recognized, I think Airbnb's done this for hotel industry, that if you just want to sell food, then just sell food. Go to Whole Foods and buy from the buffet, buy from there. It's good food, go and get your food there. If you want to create an experience, then you're going to have to actually do something that creates this whole mood and generation. And also, like you said, there's areas in the restaurant where it's maybe for a faster meal. And then there's the ones where it might be for a bit of a slower night, a slower meal, a bit more time taken. And so the restaurant can be sort of multi-diverse in that area. I had a friend send me last year, he was in New Zealand and he was in Christchurch, and he went to a restaurant. It was an Indian restaurant. And he went to the restrooms, and he was like, often the restrooms, like an unexpected jewel in the restaurant. He went to the restrooms, and he walks into the restrooms, and so he comes from music on the outside of the restaurant, so just a little bit of music, into the bathrooms, and they are a train station in Mumbai or somewhere like that. And so you can hear these people talking, you can hear trains being called, and it's like, oh, no, no, yeah, all this kind of like amazing thing. And he said, you go in there, and then all of a sudden you realize that there's this sort of commotion of a train station and stuff happening, can hear the trains. And he said, it just blows, and it's a really simple bathroom. And he's like, just blew me away. He said, so he stood there and videoed some of it so I could hear it. I went, check this out. Like, yeah, just again, that little surprise pop. And I love in a restaurant when somebody comes back to the table and they say, got to go to the bathroom. You got to go to the bathroom because it's something special. It's like, it's another environment. And it creates community and anchors, and it's also a surprise. So only those who have gone, eaten, and go actually get to experience it. I love these kind of brand points that you can create. Talking about those sort of brand point pieces with architecture, is there a way that you say for instance, you're developing the building and say it's a restaurant inside it, you're doing both? Tell me about like how you approach that from a business, not a business and financial point of view, but from a design business point of view. You've got the restaurant's values, owners' values, and needs, because restaurants are based on numbers of tables and turning them over, and how much food gets sold. Give me a bit of your process on that. That would be fascinating from a design point.
Well, something that inspired me a long time ago, we went to a project, and the person, and it was an event venue, and there was railroad ties going from the street into the parking, and it kind of had this farm kind of theme. But as soon as you pulled in, you went across these railroad ties, you started to create this experience, and it took you, it basically brought the brand or the experience out to the street. And so we really try to think about that, and how when we're doing the building and the architecture, it's not just opening the door and you're walking in and then this experience starts. It's how do you reach that out to the furthest points and pull people in. And so we kind of look at the site that way, how people are approaching it, how they're coming in and parking, how they're walking to the building, what that experience kind of creates. And then it's about that connection from the restaurant to the street as well. What's that visibility? You know, in Arizona, because of the weather that we have a lot of indoor, outdoor type spaces. And so how much visibility can you create to the interior of the restaurant from the street for that visual interest, as well as kind of almost like a marketing type?
Yeah, and it's a draw, like it's pulling you towards it.
Yep. So that transparency, that experience, and so that's kind of how we approach the architecture of it, and then also the exterior spaces of the patios and things, and how does that relationships, you know, speak to the street, speak to people when they're, you know, approaching it, and then it feeds the interior. And then it's just as important when you're sitting on the interior, you know, what you're looking out in the scene. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, areas of Phoenix where it's about being seen. So it's, you know, you want to be sitting there in the restaurant and people are passing by and the foot traffic and everything else, and you're a part of that scene. So it starts all the way from the street and just kind of feeds its way in. And we look at how that experience kind of extends itself. And like you're saying, it could all the way down to the bathrooms, and, you know, how someone just experiences it on all those different multiple levels.
Yeah, I love that. I think that, you know, one of the things I like to do with clients in, say, an urban block is I go, we can influence everything on this piece of land. And I think, I mean, you do residential as well. One of the things there is we are in a age of, or a moment of, where everybody drives their car into a garage and enters the house from the garage. So their first, not their first impression, but their first touch of the house is the garage. So then we may only have a driveway that could be, you know, 16, 20 feet long. 16, sorry, me saying that. We're 6 meters, so that's 18. So yeah, somewhere around 20 feet long, because that's the minimum requirement. And how do you set up a journey when they're in the car to go to there? And then when you come into the house, what do they get? What do they see? What's that journey? Because again, we're doing an emotional shift. They're coming home to something that it's going to be what happens from there. And you're telling me, well, like with a restaurant, you're going, so the minute that they cross onto the land that you can control, you're starting to set up this journey that's starting to cue them for what's next. And I really like that.
One of the things I love about restaurants are kind of that hybrid between the commercial and residential, because you're kind of creating both of those environments in one. And so it's a very fun space to create.
I think, yeah, there's a lot that you can learn from restaurants to put towards like homes, and then vice versa. Obviously, homes teach us about, you know, the other parts for, say, restaurants. And then if we go beyond that to, you know, like I said earlier about Airbnb spaces, you are selling accommodation, but it's not about the accommodation. It's about the experience the accommodation will deliver for people. And that experience makes such a difference to how people wake up and feel, you know, in a residential space of their own home, the experience that they have, the ease of it, the way it's formulated. This is how architecture gets to respond to humans, and as well as the environment. I find that's probably one of my most fascinating journeys in design, is constantly looking at where that shifts to. I'd like to thank Stetson Hats Australia for providing my amazing collection of open road Stetson hats. Since 1865, John B. Stetson has been crafting legendary headwear, adorning the heads of Western icons like Annie Oakley and George Custer. The open road hat debuted in 1937, beloved by artists, outlaws, presidents alike. Its timeless style fits the setting from city streets to open plains. Whether in the cab of a truck or my trusty Mini Cooper, the open road is all style. If you think hats aren't for you, you just haven't found the right one yet. Discover yours at stetsonaustralia.com or stetson.com if you're in the USA. Thanks, Stetson, for your support. Please share your Stetson moment by emailing me your photo to talkdesign@gmail.com. Let's celebrate the timeless allure of Stetson together. I wanted to add, I went to last year when I was in the States, I was in Scottsdale, and you may know the restaurant. You may have done it. I don't know. Went to a restaurant and bar, and it had the most simple, I thought, simple interior, in the sense that it had a massive big disco ball. So the mirror ball hanging in the middle, has lots of mirrors around the room, and then they fire the, like the light source onto the disco ball, and so the room is just constantly moving. And when you were saying before about it's a place, there's places to be seen, this was a place to be seen. And I can't remember who told us to go there. It might have been, Patricia and Tommy from Chin Suchout. I'm not sure, but whoever it was, they went, "Oh, you should go and check this out." And I'm there and I'm going, man, what a simple concept. But it was just like being in sort of a glitterati and then also paparazzi, because there was always lights shifting around and plenty of people prancing around, being people, showing off and stuff. But it was
Well, that
a
sounds
real
like
experience.
yeah,
Sorry.
it sounds like a restaurant that's right by our office, and they've had the disco ball, and then they switch it up. They constantly have kind of a revolving art kind of display. Sometimes they have projections on the walls that are moving, and it's the interiors is very simple. And we've actually, when we started, we met with the owner of that restaurant and we did some art installations for him. He has some restaurants in Milwaukee and here. And so we actually flew to Milwaukee and helped him with some art installations for his restaurants there. And it's fun to kind of create those kind of elements that it does kind of create a response from people when they come into the space. And it can be a good response or a bad response, but it makes people talk and like kind of think about, this is a different environment. It's different. Takes you out of your comfort zone sometimes.
Yeah, I think like I could tell you of maybe one other restaurant that I went to on that trip that had as much, for me, impact, in the sense I couldn't tell you what I ate there. Maybe it was probably something pretty basic, I think. I don't remember. But I can remember the environment so much and just thinking, this is simple, but it's inspiring. It's cool. It really works at night. I don't imagine it's great at lunch. You use the other projections at lunch kind of thing, maybe. Yeah, it was like, and it had well, the restaurant. So it's got like the patio out the front and stuff, and the way you enter and things like that. And it sparked my imagination, as in how easily you could use a disco ball to really create an environment. And, that hasn't really happened since Saturday Night Fever with John Travolta, it's, but that thing, it's like, I was like, oh, wow, that's incredible. And how it can shift the environment so greatly.
Yeah. So one of the art installations we did at that restaurant, there's blackout shades that are hidden above all the windows. And so they would do a Wednesday night blackout, and they would press a button and all those blackout shades would drop down. And the only light in the restaurant would be the candles at the tables.
Oh, wow.
And so you see the glow of the people you're sitting with.
Yeah.
And then you see servers with a small little flashlight. But it really just kind of took your focus down from all these people in the restaurant down to who's at your table. And it was it was a cool experiment to kind of see how people react to it and like how it changes the environment of the restaurant.
I imagine if we're looking at, you create, conversation levels would change, everything would change at that point, and the intimacy would come higher, people would pull towards each other more. There'd be a whole lot of amazing things. That's awesome. It's awesome. When you take experiences like that and you go, how do you do it in somebody's residential home, or how do you create, that kind of same magic? Is there a way that you approach that?
I think for homes, it's about creating those gathering spaces. And, the kitchen is always one of the most important ones. Everyone kind of comes to gather around food, and the big kind of island that's in the center of the space, maybe, or it's the living room, or how the living room connects to the backyard, and how, families can flow inside and outside. So I think those are kind of where the experiences really are focused, and how we really try to create those connections of spaces.
Mm.
In my own home, I bought a house that was built early 90s, and it had a lot of separations from the kitchen area to the dining to the living room, and a little foyer entry. And the house was structured to where I knew I could take down a lot of those walls.
Yeah,
And I got very excited about that. My wife was like, okay, like, I
I
don't see what
trust
you're
you.
saying, but I trust you. Yeah. And so I took all those walls out. And so the kitchen, dining, living room, all that's one space. And then we opened up a lot of the exterior wall to the backyard. So everything kind of flows. And so what's you know, a mid-level size house now feels like a much larger home, because it's just so open and connected to the outdoor space, and the outdoor acts like a secondary living room.
Hmm.
So I love that with homes, and I love outdoor rooms that you can kind of create. And so,
How do you get on
yeah,
with that in Arizona, where you've got temperatures that sort of will be over 100? And I want to have a good discussion around this. You've got this high temperatures, and so for people who are working in Celsius, that could be over 48 degrees or 48 degrees. So there's not a lot of places. There's plenty in Australia that experience that. But it's a dry heat, which is good. How do you work with that residential? It doesn't have to be residential, but let's just go with residential space where you've got this high heat. Obviously, you can do overhangs and stuff. The tendency for people just to want to close it down, air condition it. Yeah, tell me a bit about that if you could. Like your different
but
approaches that you've used and work best. And
sure. I mean, we see it with the homes, and we see it a lot with restaurants. It's how can we create this year-round climatized space that doesn't just become empty when it's so warm. So,
mm.
we, like you said, like we work with overhangs and shading. We really try to work with the plants, bring in good shade trees.
It's
And
a
then
lot
you
of
kind of,
biophilic design as well.
mhm.
Yeah.
And so then we work with misters, and and right
Mhm.
now it's dropping down into the 30s at nighttime here. So you kind of have those two extremes of, kind of the winter time when it does get cold enough to where people want the heat. So you work with heaters, you work with fans, and those kind of things that kind of, no matter what time of year, you can modify it to work with the climate. And then it's just having large areas of glass that can open up and just connect to that exterior space. Even when it does get hot, like, in the evenings, the temperatures do drop down, and it becomes, a pretty nice space to still enjoy. So it's how can you best utilize all those different components, and make that patio or exterior space something that you can
Mm.
um
Get
enjoy
use out
throughout.
of. I have a thing that we should build smaller. Australia and the US built the two biggest built homes, like footprint size, in the world. And we have, you know, since COVID, maybe a 30 or 40% rise in the cost of construction. And when we look at that and we go, so the solution is build smaller. Um, and I look at it and I go, where we are fortunate enough to live in amazing climates. Like for me, 330 sunshine days a year, a fair amount of humidity, but a lot of sunshine. It's torrential rain when it rains. For you, it's probably more than 330 sunshine days a year. It might even, pull in a few more of those. Climatically, it's dry for the most part, but big temperature range. It's desert temperature, hot during the day, cooler in the evenings. And then winter, summer's a big temperature change as well. Ours is like a narrower band than yours. And I go, well, to heat or cool a smaller space is more efficient. Under roof versus actual house, like actual living space, and I'll take out all the exterior living spaces. I go, if you can get under roof large spaces, so you're protecting yourself from the sun and, and then creating airflow using pools or fountains, like you said before, with misters, trees and stuff like that, so that the landscape is being part of the built structure as well. How do we pull those things all together, but build a smaller house? And when you open all the doors up, it's huge. We have a rule here where I live. An ADU is allowed to be 60 square meters. I don't know what that is in your language, but it's 60 square meters to the external wall space, except that you're allowed a carport on top of that, and you're allowed any decked or external spaces on top of that. So if you started with 60 square meters, the average house here is probably a few hundred square meters. Most of the stuff that we design would be around 360 plus square meters. But you could take the 60, and yes, you might only get one good bedroom in there because it's an ADU, or maybe two if you're tightening it up. And you can put 100 square meters of decks on the thing, of outdoor patios and stuff. And when you do that, you're actually able to extend out into the spaces that are existing as well. And when you were saying before, I'm going, so do you see any people, or do you see people going, let's build smaller because of the cost of construction? Because I haven't seen that yet.
We have. I mean, we've seen people try to build more efficiently, and how can they make the most of their. Well, I guess we see people kind of peel it back. Like, let's not build new. How can we just make our current thing more efficient?
Yeah.
And how can we repurpose it, or like maybe do a small addition or something to it? We saw the same thing during the recession. Like, how can it was kind of that step away from, let's not put our money towards something new and big. Let's make what we have better. And so
we've seen that here as well. A lot of renovation and addition work, as opposed to, like, how do we make what we've got better? That's become a major focus over just new building. And it has resulted in less knockdown rebuild projects. Talking to different, we deal with a lot of builders, obviously, like you, talking to different builders and stuff, we're seeing more of that. That seems to be the landscape. And I'm interested from your point of view, what you think we will see in the next 5 years or 10 years in this picture, because interest rates in Australia have started to stabilize, and I think we're behind the US with that. Yours have stabilized fairly, and people are going, okay, we kind of know where we're at now. And they're starting to move again based on that. And so what do you reckon the next 5 years looks like?
what's interesting is Phoenix, even though they're having the highest interest rates or the cost of construction, do we still have a lot of people moving to Phoenix, and we have a lot of businesses moving to Phoenix. And so it's kind of insulated us where we're not as affected as other areas of the country. And so we haven't seen the slowdown or some of the craziness that other areas have seen. And so I think Phoenix is going to still kind of drive, the new construction and the kind of rehabiting some of the older spaces of town. And I was at a lecture the other day, and it was really interesting that the higher interest rates and cost of construction has slowed down the expansion or the kind of the spread of Phoenix, and people are moving back more into the center of town where the areas are built, because they see the value in purchasing, because 10 years ago, a parking lot wasn't worth very much, but now a parking lot is worth a whole lot more. It's like the value of land has increased in the city or around the immediate city. So people are moving back in and taking advantage of that value.
Also, I suppose when you go back into the city, there's different planning zones, and it's easier to have more density. where in residential neighborhoods, density will be set at less. And so you're gentrifying. I was in Seattle last year as well, and one of the things that I was, made aware of there with some of the architects I went and visited was that I think occupancy in downtown Seattle was running at something like 43%. And how do you regenerate a city that's got, since COVID, 43%? That's a big, that means there's 60% of landlords that are hurting or something like that as well. And,
Right.
like a city in decay can become a city in decay if you don't do something with it, and if you don't get people back into it and revitalize it. And it's interesting what you're saying there with, so in this next period, like Phoenix is seeing this, people are moving back into this space. It's just cool. I like that. There'll be gentrification, and it will be done with a lot more placemaking and a lot more sympathy. And I traveled the year before to Barcelona, and Barcelona, have you ever been? You ever been to Barcelona in Spain? Great city to go to. And from an architectural point of view, it's a really old city. It's got Roman ruins in it, it's got stuff that's buried under the ground that whole parts of the city that have been filled over in the years. And I was staying in I was at an architectural conference, and I was staying in I want to call it a square, but it was more of a triangle so it had buildings all around looking into this square, and it had trees, and staying in this little hotel, my wife and I, and we were looking out into the space, and she'd found this place online. So there was a conference hotel, and we decided not to stay in the conference hotel, even though a friend of mine designed it. We decided not to stay there. We decided to stay in this little square, and it was only like half a block away. And my friend Johannes, we were walking. He's the guy who was he designed the hotel. We're walking, doing a walking tour of Barcelona with us and showing us all these sites. And he comes around into this little square triangle and says, so this place here. And I'm like, oh, that's our hotel just there. That's our little hotel. And he said, in the 70s, I think it was, there was an old building or two old buildings in what was now the square. And they had a mayor that went through in the I wouldn't say gentrification, in a kind of a cleanup period, and went, let's identify all the buildings that are in the city that are beyond reasonable repair, and there's significant buildings around them. And so they went in, they removed sections of the city. They bought those buildings, knocked them down, and then they landscaped all inside and created these little piazzas where you would look into, and this had a kids' playground, and it had some shops that opened in the bottom of what would have once probably been apartments, or maybe a little convenience store, little bar, a little pizzeria, those kind of things, and created community again out of a very, very old famous city. And it was a real lesson in when he was walking us through in this placemaking. And then he showed us some other buildings that were amazing buildings, but they didn't placemake like that. And, we sort of had a little bit of a conversation around it. And I'm thinking of, when you going back into Phoenix or into these spaces, what will those spaces need to become to hold them there? How much COVID taught people that, we need trees kind of, I don't know, more biophilic design from its inception, sort of, and being named in the 80s to now. Biophilic design is like back in the 70s again. Everybody wants a waterfall and a garden in their house. We're seeing it, like you said, in restaurants. I've been to restaurants where the whole ceiling's dripping with plants, and it's like going into a jungle atmosphere almost. But these really amazing things. So I wonder how these spaces in downtowns and stuff will respond to bring enough nature in so that it really feels amazing. More parks, or it's not even parks, it's just more integration of those things in the spaces.
one of the projects that I love that we had the opportunity to work on, it's called Arizona Wilderness Brewery. And I introduced them to a developer who had a building in downtown Phoenix. And the developer was excited because he had a building in downtown with a parking lot that could hold like 24 cars. And you don't get a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the brewery was excited because it was a cool old building. It had some things tacked on over the years we wanted to kind of pull away and clean up, but they wanted to take that parking lot and remove it. And I love the idea of it. And we removed 10,000 square feet of asphalt and created an outdoor wilderness space. And it's got trees and it's great for dogs and people and big picnic tables. And it's got a big kind of a patio shade area and then a shipping container that has like a bar setup. And it it totally, like, that developer saw this parking lot as an asset.
Yeah,
And so for someone to come in and say, no, that parking lot's not an asset. We want a great outdoor space. That's the asset for downtown. We want to create something that people can come to in that community kind of gathering space. And the project has been so successful because of that.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and let's see more of it, I'd say. Let's see more of that happen. I've got a couple of last questions. First one is in your own home, what is your favorite space? What emotion does it evoke and why? It was more than one question in one, but it is one question.
So in our kitchen, I took a large slab of stone and made the community, or like a community kitchen table. And it kind of waterfalls on one side, and it's where our family sits. And we have a dining room table right next to it, but we never use it. We sit around that kitchen island, and it's where my kids do their homework. It's where we sit together and eat. And it's really kind of the focal point of our house. And so I love that is the point where we connect the most, where we can sit there with each other, and whether it's discussing like we were working on a school project yesterday for my older son, and then I was sitting there reading with my younger son the day before that. And it's the space where we really just get to connect.
Love it.
And it's not a couch. I mean, you're in a couch, you're sitting next to somebody and you're focusing on a TV. When you're sitting at that table, you're looking at each other and you're really connecting, and it's where the conversations happen.
Awesome. What emotion does it evoke for you?
I mean, I think about the love I have for my kids, and just that kind of love I have for connecting with them and sharing stories. And
It's an interesting thing, different, as you say, different zones create different things. And your awareness of that and the fact that you're doing it for others all the time, especially in that semi-commercial or in the commercial space. I love the fact of looking at what it is that when you get to get rid of work and transition into your home, that's a solid spot. That's a spot where you can give, receive, be part of everything, and it brings everybody around. Yeah, it's magic. Love it.
I think a big part of what I do is I'm kind of a coach or a leader in work, and that I want to support and mentor others and help people achieve their goals. And I do the same thing when I come home with my kids and my family, is that I like to sit down and connect with them in that same level, be a resource to them, help them grow and achieve their own goals. So
Awesome. Awesome. That's really cool. Okay, one last one then. One last project. Can never do another one. I ask this of a lot of people. After you do this last project, that's it. Can't call yourself an architect anymore. Can't do anything else about that. That chapter is closed. What do you choose to do? What's the project?
Oh boy. Yeah, out of all the projects we do, the ones that are the most rewarding are the ones that we work with nonprofits.
Like
And we
Rosie
don't just,
House?
like Rosie's House.
Yeah.
And we don't just do those as something on our resume. It's truly because we care about our community, we care about their people, we care about supporting them or supporting the people that they're trying to support. So like Rosie's house, it was this warehouse of a building. They were expanding and they wanted to create better classrooms, better spaces for kids in underserved area to learn and play music. And so we helped them achieve those goals, and they've been thriving since. And now we're working with the Arizona Cancer Foundation for Children and creating a space that's safe for kids with cancer to play in and connect, and that supports the families and gives them resources that they need while going through a difficult time. And so if I was to do a project and never have to do another one, I would want to do something that just gives back the most that it can to the community, and just kind of be almost like a legacy project to say, this is truly achieving my passion. It's helping people. And with our designs, we design in a way that's good for the environment as well. So it really goes back to that 7th grade paper that I wrote, and, really making that connection. And
Yeah.
And it's funny, it wasn't until like I was in my late 30s that I realized that everything I had been doing throughout my career all related back to what I originally wrote down about what I wanted architecture to be and how I wanted to practice. And so I think if I was to end my career, that would be how I would end it.
Man, absolutely beautiful. I love it. I love it. That, coupled with your family piece, is the true values that drive you. It's fantastic. We didn't talk about Rosie's house. I would encourage every listener to go and look on their website of ALINE, and then also search up Rosie's house. What they guys have done is phenomenal, and they've created a bunch of spaces that, oh, they just assist people in living way, way better lives, and possibility, inspiration. I applaud you, man. It's beautiful work. And with beautiful purpose.
Thank you.
Really great. Brian, fantastic to have you on the show, man. I really, really enjoyed it. We'll post all your socials, etc., so people know how to find you. I encourage the audience to please reach out directly to Brian or directly to me. Reach out, ask us questions, anything you want to know more about, by all means, ask the question, because the Talk Design community is a large and growing community, not just of listeners, but of designers and creative thinkers that are all on the show. And we love hearing from you, the listener. It's important to us, and we love feedback. So go all in. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into our conversation. I hope it left you both informed and inspired. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen, and please don't hesitate to share your design thoughts with me. It's always a joy to hear from you. If you're like me and crave a deeper dive into design thinking, coupled with a love for travel and adventure, consider one of my architectural adventures. Join me and some of my wonderful design friends and embark on a journey of a lifetime. Apply for an unforgettable design experience at adrianramsey.com. With our clients spanning the globe, I firmly believe behind every great project are great people. If you're a great person and seeking to turn your dream into a reality, I'd be honored to design your home with you. Why not join the ranks of our exceptional clients, and let's make your heart sing. Reach out to me at studio@ardesignhouse.com. That's studio@ardesignhouse.com, and let's get a conversation going and make your heart sing.